Yeah, just my take on things. My answer to number two. Guided discovery. Identifying, challenging your beliefs. Reframing your mind, negative thoughts release. Those cognitive distortions decrease until they cease. Let's go. Guided discovery. Identifying, challenging your beliefs. Reframing your mind, negative thoughts.
All right, I think we're recording. Welcome back, everybody, to Peplow's Ghost. I am your host, Dr. Dan Weisman, and I am thrilled to have another guest here that, quite honestly, been trying to kind of nail down. He's a busy guy, so it's been kind of one of those scheduling things, but I am super excited to have him here on the podcast and get to hear from his perspective about why he likes to be in psych and psychotherapy and its use in that and such. So I'm always here. I'm joined with my friend and colleagues, Dr. Shawn Convoy from Duke and Dr. Melissa Chapman Hayes from Minneapolis. And so really thrilled here to have Dr. Shawn Gallagher. Dr. Shawn Gallagher is a PhD from the University of Arizona. We were just talking to him about the weather and the rain that he's getting. So if you're anybody's from that area, you kind of can relate. He is a dual certified PMHNP and FNP. So he has both a family and psych background. He is what I strive to be here in the next couple of months, the past president of the International Society of Psychiatric Nurses, as I am the current president of the Psych Mental Health Nurse International Society of Psychiatric Nurses, but in the current treasurer of the ISPN as well. So really excited about that too. And retired military. So hopefully maybe we'll get into that. Served, I believe, well, you can tell us. I mean, I believe in the Army. Is that correct? U.S. Army as officer. And so excellent to join you, and thank you again for your service in that regard as well. So this is, one of the questions I like to throw out. I think, Shawn, we've known each other long enough to ask this question. Do you remember the first time that we met?
I think it was at on a ISPN Foundation meeting, right?
Okay.
I was a board liaison, I think.
Oh yeah, that's right. I forgot about that. I was thinking the first time we met was in Ronaldo Beach at the ISPN conference. I think that was in 23, and yeah, we were cheering on the Hawkeyes, the Lady Hawkeyes. They were Caitlin Clark was kind of doing her thing through the tournament, and so we were watching there. So I think that was the first time we physically met. I think
physically met, absolutely. Yeah, I do. I remember that weekend well. Yes.
Yes. All right. Busy time. So awesome. Well, thanks, Shawn. Well, the first question I'd like to get out is just to kind of hear from your story. Like, what first drew you to psychotherapy? Incorporating that in your practice. Again, kind of even if you want to go back to like your FNP days. What draw you to PMHNP role and psychotherapy? Was there a patient, a mentor, or some moment that kind of really changed your perspective on that? So let it take away from there. Thanks.
Sure. Thanks for having me. I can't say that there was one specific moment. I did my advanced practice psych graduate rotation on a consultation liaison service at an academic medical center in Rhode Island, and had a fantastic mentor. And one of the first things he said to me is that that we have to get a lot of information from people in a very short amount of time, and the only way we can do that is to talk with them, to talk with people. And the bottom line is, if they don't feel comfortable talking with us, then we can't help them. So it's incumbent upon us to do what we can to try to establish a comfortable, safe environment, if you will. And so that was one of the sort of first lessons or pearls of wisdom I took away from Dr. Badger, Jim Badger, in Rhode Island. And so it was really from that point on, it kind of clicked, I guess, the importance of the art of communication. And even though I knew I wasn't going to be a bona fide psychotherapist, but that psychotherapy is our origin, right? Speaking of Peplau, right? And then even in a consultation liaison role where it's, ICU, ER, you're, busy, got everything going on, all these teams, at the end of the day, you're sitting on the side of someone and you're you've got to talk with them, and provide that support, because in that moment, right, not only is there something going on from a mental health perspective, but in that setting, they're also very physically ill, right? I mean, let's face it, like people who are physically well aren't kept in the hospital very long. So if you're in the hospital, you're not feeling good physically, you've got something from a mental health perspective going on. And so I think establishing some sort of a rapport, interpersonal rapport from, the minute you walk in the room and say hello, just the whether it's the look on your face or, not looking down at your chart, or back in those days, it was the PDAs, the personal pocket, whatever they used to be called, and making
Palm
eye
pilots?
contact. Palm pilots. Thank you. There we go. It was
Nobody will reference that. So
looking at a Palm Pilot, that was the thing. Eyes up from the Palm Pilot. That was, and so really, that from that point on, I guess if I didn't understand before that, I sort of was intentionally aware of the importance of that interpersonal connect. It's trying to establish that interpersonal connection to start building a trust. Mm-hmm.
So yeah, if I can paraphrase that a little bit, I mean, it's, something that I don't know, this week has just kind of hit me over the head a lot of times, that this is a very relational type of specialty that we get into. And I think that's what you're emphasizing for sure. And so, do you remember anything from Dr. Badger, like any quick tips, like, anything that he kind of, it's always funny how, you get some wording. So just say the words a certain way. I think like you were saying, keep your eyes up and other things that, are kind of foundational, but anything else that you remember from Dr. Badger that you still kind of carry around today?
The eye contact, maintaining eye contact, which I guess sounds simple, but I found it kind of challenging, because it's uncomfortable, right? Especially as a student. So that eye contact, that sort of trying to body language, sort of leaning in just enough, but not too much, but showing that you're engaged. And then, so I'd have to say from the psychotherapy interpersonal perspective, those are some pearls that stand out. And he certainly taught me so much more. But in terms of that relational perspective, yeah.
So Shawn, I'm gonna go back to your initial introduction and then ask you a question. So I typically find when people are reminiscing about the past and they say, and I'm writing this down because it was a good quote, I remember that weekend well, suggests to me that was one heck of a weekend. So sometime offline, I'm gonna have to find out that weekend with you. When you were talking about Dr. Badger, you kind of brought me back into my past and working with some really seasoned clinicians who taught me a lot. When you mentioned the name Michael Nolan kind of came to my head, and Michael Nolan shared with me when I was a Navy hospital corpsman working in psychiatry back in the early 1990s. He said, Shawn, the secrets of our profession are written in invisible ink on the margins of the textbooks that we read. And I always thought that to be a really profound statement. So I'll give you an open page here to kind of speak to it. But what's the stuff written in invisible ink on your textbook that you teach your students?
Wow, that's a profound quote or maxim. That's fascinating. That's a good question. It's one of something I do say often. Is that I will say, quote, this is as much an art as it is a science. And so I always put the art first. And I'd have to say that it's as much seen as what's not seen, because my sort of educational roots were in consultation-liaison psychiatry. As we all know, that's a lot of detective work. And so I guess from my background and my frame of reference and where I come when I'm talking with students, because my background and my preferences have been inpatient and crisis oriented since, is that what we're seeing, when we're talking with someone in front of us is probably 30 or 40% of what's going on. And so really the social determinants, before we were calling them social determinants, or using that term, spend a lot of time acknowledging that social determinants, and finding out where someone lives, their access to care, the basics, right? But those are the things that aren't necessarily in the textbook, right? When you're talking about, sort of the rudimentary aspects of an evaluation, so I have to say, yeah, looking deeper than who you're talking to, looking at the person's bigger, their bigger picture.
Well said. I think one thing that's been reinforced to us, particularly over the past couple of years, is that, and I think it was a previous Surgeon General said it, perhaps our zip code is probably more actionable than our genetic code, right?
Wow. Yeah.
Cool.
Shawn's blowing this podcast with the quotes. Man, he's coming hot.
Seriously. Yeah.
He's coming hot today. I love it.
Yeah,
Invisible ink, and that's great.
Friday.
Yeah.
So one thing that we've learned on this podcast and heard over and over again is that so many PMHNPs today feel pulled towards shorter visits, more prescriptions, and pressure to not have as much connection as desired or would be therapeutically helpful. How have you personally navigated that tension in your own work, and what keeps you grounded in the psychotherapeutic side of practice?
So true, right? I'm upfront with folks when we first meet. Again, most of my background is inpatient and crisis. So in terms of those brief outpatient visits, I don't have as much of a frame of reference for that. I do have some, but in either setting, when we sit down and introduce myself, I try to the best of my ability, based on the situation, sort of say, introduce myself, and if it's all right with you, we're gonna talk. I'm gonna ask you some questions. We probably have about, if this were an outpatient visit, maybe 15, 20 minutes. And I'll just kind of say, I said, it's not enough time. But what I want to do is, I want us to work together so that I can offer you the most that I can in that amount of time, so that when you leave here, we've got a plan. And if we need to talk longer, that's fine. But we can schedule some additional time to do that. So I try to sort of set the expectations. Sort of this is how it has to be for now, right? Because if for no other reason, you've got a schedule to keep, but wanting to maintain that rapport, right? That's right. So then also sort of I do say to them, we can absolutely talk more after. If you'd like, we can, I'm happy to do that. And I've always offered that. I can't say that I recall, anyone that's ever come back later in the day to do that. But I've always put that offer out there. And so, and in an inpatient setting, again, psychiatric inpatient or crisis, people are very, upset, or a lot of emotion in the moment. And so in those settings, it's important. It's very important to establish a connection for de-escalation. And so I think that there's, there are moments for that to establish that interpersonal connection, even when someone is, psychotic. That presence, really sort of letting someone know, like, okay, we're here. We have a few minutes. Like, let's make the most of it. I'm kind of paraphrasing here, but I'd have to say to get the most out of it, I sort of establish upfront what the reality of it, just the quantum physics. This is how much time we have. I want to do the most that I can to help you. And if it's not enough right now with talking, then you can come back and we can talk more.
Yeah, I think, that may go into a lot of, I think, of what's, perceptions, right? I mean, I think I tell my students a lot of this, that, and I have to look up the study. I don't know it off the top of my head, but I remember there was a study once that had followed around physicians who would go in and do rounds, in a hospital, and they'd go in, they'd come out, they go in and come out, and they kind of tracked how long they were actually in a room, which most physicians are not very long, and probably nurse practitioners are probably in that same boat, but they actually showed a difference as far as perception of how much time was spent with them if they sat down in the chair or rolled up in one of the rollers or something like that, but just took that minute. The actual time didn't change very much. But if the patient kind of felt like you were there, and so that's what I guess I'm hearing from you, Shawn, is that you're setting up that parameter, you're setting up that expectations that there's not enough time to talk about all the problems that are bringing you to the hospital right now, but I'm available to you, and that's important too. So yeah, does that sound like kind of what you were saying, or does that relate?
Well, yeah, absolutely, because right, if again we're in a market driven healthcare infrastructure. And so, yes, so our role primarily is medication, biophysical and medication management. And right, as we all know, to be able to do that, safely, appropriately, people have to feel comfortable talking with us. Even if it is in those brief moments. But you're absolutely right in terms of that perception of time. Sitting down, on the roller stools, yes, pulling up on the side of someone's gurney. Absolutely.
Doesn't take much, but it takes a lot, right? I think I remember back to when you were saying just maintaining eye contact. Sometimes, especially for our students, that's uncomfortable, right? You get more comfortable as you go along, but taking that few moments, and I've always kind of reminded myself that when I go into a room, find the chair, try to sit down. And again, I know that's not going to impact, how long I'm going to be with that person, but it does have quite a significant impact on their perception of that time. So, well, my next question kind of goes back a little bit. I'm just going to ask you to kind of, do some free association here. We'll kind of get psychodynamic, but just think back on your career, and maybe this is a focus on, you do have multiple certifications. So you're coming from family practice and you're in psych now. And so was it sometime when you were a student or when you got into practice that maybe kind of solidified and said, I found my home? It's like, I hear people when they go to conferences, I found my people, I'm with my tribe, those kind of things. But I think that's something that kind of happens over time. And so do you mind kind of sharing, that event or multiple events? I mean, sometimes it doesn't have to be just kind of one type of thing, but anything kind of jump out that you can think of?
Sure. So it actually started when I did my psych. I was actually psych first and then family practice. And so doing my graduate rotation in that consultation-liaison setting, it felt at home, right? Even though I hadn't been there before, it just felt natural. And so then from that point on, I was always drawn to inpatient ER crisis type environments. And probably about 2.5 years later. Yeah, about 2.5 years later, I was doing travel nursing. And I had finished graduate school at that point, getting ready to take my exam, and was working on an inpatient unit in Alexandria, Virginia, one of many inpatient units I'd worked on with travel nursing and whatnot. And it's back in 2002. People are sick, right? Like people that have psychiatric conditions that are on a psychiatric unit, like they're physically sick, right? Like it's one of those things where it's like, wow, there's two things going on at the same time here. And so again, I was in my early 20s, so of course that's not new information, not new clinical information, but for me, sort of kind of growing and the experience and being like, wow, like people are like there's a lot going on here: diabetes, hypertension, and the sequelae that go along with that. And so this was back before the DNP days, right? And this was actually before the PMHNP role was sort of national, if you will, right? It was kind of regional at that point, in many respects, because I went to graduate school in Rhode Island, and up there in the Northeast, I think Boston College may have been one of the first programs in that region of the country to have a bona fide PsycNP program that started growing in the early 2000s. But primarily then it was the PsycNP role, wasn't there. So it was the psych clinical nurse specialist with prescriptive authority that was the model I was educated in sort of the academic setting, and then inpatient, and so doing all the psychiatric prescribing and whatnot. But the PsycNP role wasn't there yet. So the only avenue for those of us that were advanced practice psych that wanted to sort of, treat the whole person, and especially those that were rather, ill, and we're talking more than just for sore throats and ear infections, was you go back and you become a family nurse practitioner. So you go back. And so I went back to Marymount University in Arlington, part-time for a couple of years, and I got my family nurse practitioner certification there. And that, I would say, that was I finished 2006, certified in 2007. And, was it magic after that, I was able to do so much more? No, but wow, as time went on, has that made a difference? Having that expanded, not just knowledge, but also the skill set, the privilege, the honor of being able to take care of someone as a whole person. Again, especially in these inpatient environments where it's not uncommon for psych NPs that are working in inpatient units to also be responsible for doing regular physical HMPs, and so, but then being able to also, help manage someone who was, relatively stable on, with diabetes management, hypertension, cholesterol, all of the chronic conditions that would otherwise bring someone else in who just doesn't have that understanding of folks that we work with that have those needs. And again, I'm talking about sort of the more acute. I know that most of our population, most are treated in family practice, primary care, but so I'm talking about sort of a more acute. And so it was really, that was sort of my sort of trajectory from psych to family practice, which is sort of opposite of what we're a trend that we see since, right? It's usually mostly family practice and psych.
That, my apologies. My bias was showing, right? I mean, that's my experience. Is a lot of FNPs going back and getting psych. So thank you for correcting me on that. I appreciate it.
It's all good.
But it's, and that's, that could be a whole conversation too. I mean, I appreciate that that's where the solidifying kind of came, that you were in the right space, right place, and felt qualified enough to care for the multitude of issues. Because you're right, because I do a weekend a month on a psych unit, and yeah, it is the most terrifying thing. And thank God we have a hospitalist that rounds with us, because that person, I frequently am texting him all the time going, hey, this is going on. Can you help me out? And he's so good. He just, I'll take care of that. And so, but yeah, to have that capability and scope to be able to kind of care for both of those issues, which are so relevant, is great. So thank you, Shawn.
Hey, Shawn, so as you were talking, I was reflecting, and we share some similar experiences. I think my first experience after graduate school was assigned doing consultation liaison and hospitalist work in an overseas military treatment facility. And I remember those first 3 years doing that role, never feeling more alive as a psych NP and never feeling more scared as a psych NP. And to this day, I still send Christmas cards to the neurologist and the internal medicine doc that I had on speed dial while I was there. It got me thinking about this idea of imposter syndrome. And a pretty good chunk, I imagine, of our listenership are students who are kind of enrolled in psych NP programs. I'm wondering, from your vantage now, you're on the other side of your career where you've had a lot of experience amassed. Can you give them some guidance about how they can potentially navigate imposter syndrome moving forward?
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, I mean, I may be on the other side, but I still experience it, right? I'm not, I'm not sure if for me, I don't know if that'll ever go away entirely, um, because in any environment that for me, I can just speak for me. If I'm going into an environment that's new to me, well, people have been there. So they've been there long before Shawn Gallagher. They'll be there long after Shawn Gallagher, and so I'm there for however brief a period that is. And so, yeah, I it's not probably on at least 6 or 9 month basis. Wherever I am, I'm reminded, sort of in my own mind, like that sort of that imposter piece. I guess accepting it, understanding that it's okay to feel that way. Right. But as we know, when it becomes an issue is when it interferes with your ability to function as a provider. But yeah, acknowledging it's okay. I kind of feel like I don't belong here. I'm not really quite sure. I know what I'm doing. I remember even this was in an inpatient crisis setting I was in. We were talking about something, and it was about quetiapine, and I didn't realize that, sort of on the street, so to speak, Seroquel were called Susies, I guess. And in jail, and correctional facilities, it's really, it was not uncommon for it to be misused. Well, at the time, I didn't know that, right? I mean, I didn't have much background in correctional care, or really any background. And I remember, I had ordered quetiapine for someone who happened to, be going back to jail probably, within the next, few weeks after he was stabilized. And, some colleague had said, "Oh, well, I see you ordered quetiapine." And I was like, "Well, yeah, that's, for a variety of reasons," explained it. And he's like, "Oh, well, he's going to be going back to jail." And I wasn't getting it. Like, I was like, okay, well, this is, and I felt in that moment, I would have to say, I felt some imposter syndrome, because there were a couple other people around, and it's like, I didn't know that. And I'm like, wow, I'm kind of, wow. And I said that in the moment. I said, I feel really uncomfortable right now. Like almost like I don't belong in the conversation, because I had no idea about this. So I'm a fan of transparency and self-depreciating humor in terms of when it comes to things like imposter syndrome, and just sort of just putting it out there, disarming people, saying, okay, hey, you know what? I'm the new guy. I don't know if that answers your question or not, but
Brilliantly so. And I will just go to the audience and say, if it is an incredibly seasoned, doctorally prepared psych nurse practitioner who's been a past president of the ISPN can continue to experience imposter syndrome, it's perfectly reasonable that you'd feel it in transition to practice. Give yourself some grace.
Amen. Absolutely.
Okay. I love that too. And I think, it's because I just had this as well. I had a colleague of mine who's 10 years down the road further, and I wanted to put her up for an award. And she immediately came back saying, "I don't think I deserve this award." I'm like, "You meet every criteria for this award. What are you talking about?" And it's just like, and that's why I wrote back to her. I said, "Well, I guess imposter syndrome never goes away. It's something we just continue to have." And the other thing, I don't know why this kind of brings up too, but I'll just kind of share the vulnerability that I think you shared, Shawn, is something that should be admired more. I think too much we live in a world of gotcha. Especially in inpatient, acute, it's all this kind of gotcha type of thing. I think of less gotcha and more just kind of having an understanding and just being okay with that, maybe you don't understand everything. Maybe, I don't think we ever understand everything. And so, yeah, I don't know, that just came up. I don't know if you want to speak on that, but, yeah.
Oh, in terms of just acknowledge sort of our sort of fallibility, or in terms of just clarify that a little bit, just to
sorry, yeah, no, I was going to say that gotcha kind of place that people sometimes get to, where it's like, aha, now I got you. You're using your alprazolam too much, or you're going to be misusing your quetiapine, or these kind of things, where maybe we should look at them and say, hey, what's going on? Why are you misusing these medications? And kind of get to that root.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yes. Yeah. And as so what Shawn was saying a few minutes ago, regardless of where you are in your career spectrum, someone's going yes, there's always going to be sort of that the risk of that situation, or if I could just say the proverbial, like that guy, that's going to try to, trip you up or whatnot, when you're in those settings or situations with it. And it can be intimidating, right? Especially if someone's saying something to you about medication that you've prescribed or didn't prescribe or whatnot. That can kind of, it's like you're like then you're getting questioning, like, clinical judgment or whatnot. And so that's where I say I just automatically, for me, my coping mechanism is sort of just transparency, self-depreciating humor. So if they did have a gotcha intention, chances are, and hopefully I've probably disarmed it, within the first few seconds. But yeah, speaking of students listening, if I could just, it's never worth a power struggle. It is never worth a power struggle. We're all people are going to have disagreements, and that's okay. Something I did remember from graduate school when we were talking about medications one time in clinical, and it was about SSRIs. And I remember asking, how do you decide which one? And it wasn't my preceptor. It was another psychiatrist. I'm forgetting who it was, but he was out of UMass General. And we were talking, and he's like, honestly, he's like, I could go through a whole like litany of pharmacokinetic and pharmacodynamic. He's like, at this point, when you get out, he's like, it's dealer's choice. He's like, you're gonna become comfortable with, your agents that you're going to use that are, and that's when I also started learning about formularies. He's like, it's going to really depend on what's on formulary, and whatnot. And so that's how we sort of become accustomed to practicing. And so when you go into a different environment, yes, that's where you could get the, some of this gotcha stuff. It might be a different formulary, different culture of prescribing. So it'll never go away, but I guess just smile and look away.
Great advice. So I believe this is the last question. Since we're on a podcast that's called Peplau's Ghost, let's imagine that Hildegard Peplau herself was sitting in the room with us. What do you think she'd be most proud of in psychiatric nursing today? And what do you think she might still be challenging us to do better?
I think the progress I think that we've made in terms of, pride, again, because she was a trailblazer. And so to see where we've come, from late 40s, early 50s, right? In terms of our knowledge base, scope of practice, the impact that we've had with helping people. And I think to that end, the other side of that coin is the concern is that has come at a bit of an expense, if you will, in terms of not the interpersonal aspect or foundation that is really, her trademark has been somewhat diluted, right? I guess that's how I would. So I guess that's where I would see that sort of two-sided. Wow, you've made a lot of progress, but oh boy, yeah, that has come at an expense, because now you are just, I think we were talking earlier, just meeting with people for 15 or 20 minutes and not getting to know people. Yeah, and then AI, Dr. Convoy had mentioned about AI. Yeah, I think that's something that anyone will be concerned about. But I think that would probably also be a particular concern to someone like Hildegard Peplau.
Yeah, sold our soul a little bit, right? I mean, it's definitely has paid off, and you're right. There, it's a fun kind of intellectual trick to think of, how far she would see us. I mean, it's like, yeah, somebody from the 50s throwing an iPhone in their hand. I mean, just be blown away by it, but yeah, sometimes that distance and things that we still strive for is missing. And how do we keep that up? So we keep that up by having this podcast. So that's the end of our episode right now. So thank you so much. Appreciate you listening. Please subscribe, like, put a comment in. Thank you to Dr. Shawn Gallagher for being here. Really appreciate his information, his knowledge, his expertise, his wisdom, just being who he is. So thank you so much, and wonderful. And we'll be back and we'll take a little break. I think we're going to be off a couple of weeks, but we'll be back and we'll have more new episodes coming. So take care, and we'll see you later.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's one of those things I think we just continue to get better at. I don't know. But yeah, no, Shawn, you did great. I thank you again for all that you do. And
Well,
yeah.
you all too. And Melissa, we haven't had a chance to meet. Shawn Gallagher, Arizona. Where are you out of again?
I'm in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and I am not I'm not a nurse. I have a psych background, but I'm not a nurse.
Psychologist. Okay. Yeah. Okay. All right. Minneapolis. Okay. So yeah, it gets cold up there with Dan, right?
It is.
Yeah.
Shawn, not so much, right? Shawn's also in a temperate area, relatively tempered. Yeah.
You're making me jealous. How cold is it, Melissa? Is it getting really cold or not too bad?
It has been so warm this season. It's just starting to dip. I think the high today is like in the 60s. So it's great. We still have green trees.
Wild stuff. Wild. All right. Well, thanks again, everybody. Appreciate it. We'll see you later. Take care.
Take care. Thank you. Bye.
Emotional reasoning. Too much salt like this, too much seasoning. They feel it, therefore it's true. Work hard until those thoughts are finally leaving, so you can be you. They feel it, therefore it's true. Work hard until those thoughts are finally leaving, so you can be you. Guided discovery. Identifying, challenging your beliefs. Reframing your mind, negative thoughts release. Let it go. These cognitive distortions decrease until they cease. Yeah, guided discovery. Identifying, challenging your beliefs. Reframing your mind, negative thoughts release. Let it go. These cognitive distortions decrease until they cease.